And welcome to Alchemy 101. All right, there we go. Had a little technical difficulties there for a second. Tonight we're doing a little something new aside from our normal broadcast on Artists First. I decided to go ahead and do a live YouTube this week as well instead of the usual Facebook. So we're transitioning on how we're going to be doing the podcast and the shows. But I expect all of it to just be able to give you guys better quality of information and perspective and stuff. So thank you guys again. If you're with me, whether you're live in YouTube this evening, feel free to ask any questions or interject at any moment. If you guys are on Artists First, thank you for attending, and please contact me at halo.marques@gmail anytime for any support or any questions. I appreciate you guys. Tonight's episode is something that I've been working on off and on in my mind for months, and things just kind of fell into alignment this week to finally have the time I needed to really, kind of process, re-download, and reassess the type of information on the topic, right? Because what we're going to talk about tonight is something that's really, really broad, though it's extremely specific, which I promise myself will make a lot more sense by the time we're done. But, and it's a lot of things that can be touchy to a lot of people. And that's one of the things I really enjoy about talking on the show, because a lot of these things would not be touchy if we had time to actually talk about it like we should, right? So tonight's episode is going to be about egos, empaths, and energy fields. And all these things have direct relation to each other, believe it or not. So it's pretty cool, and I'm really, really excited. So we're going to look at the ego more specifically because, guys, there's a lot of opinions and ideas and versions of what the overall ego is. I'm going to try to add a little bit of clarity to that. And then, so we're going to talk about kind of the outward ego. And the outward ego is kind of like an operating system, right? And again, we'll get into that. We're going to talk about empaths, the emotion detector, kind of like the translator for the operating system. And then energy fields and different tools that we have in order to kind of detect this version of reality, right? So sorry, got people in the channel. We're new to this, but we have a great time tonight. So let's get into this. So I like to kind of, we'll skip some stuff just for the sake of time, make sure we cover everything tonight. So the ego that we're talking about, right? The outward ego. This is like the operating system within the ego program. And I'll get into that a little bit more, but understand that ego is not the same as confidence or knowledge of self, though like a lot of ego-driven perspective can't really see the difference between that. Like not being able to see the difference between green and emerald, and we'll get into that a little bit more as well. Part of what the outward ego does as like a defensive system and also as a way to keep itself fed is it creates this version of worthlessness and versions of self-esteem that create a lot of distortion within your emotional spectrum. And we'll get into that. But really the people that have this kind of embedded outward ego approach to everything, these are the people that have the most resistance to interacting with empaths, right? But they're also the people that need them the most. So it's really interesting. Empaths, obviously. I thought that was really interesting. There's a few different definitions about what that is, but empaths essentially are just like a biometric reader, for lack of a better term. But they're really, really great at emotional stability. They've learned the emotional spectrum. And Act Fasta, thank you for your comment in the channel. Just had to refresh a couple times, so that's great. The emotion detector is really similar to like an airport and metal detector, right? And we'll get into that. But these people are very real. There's a lot more of them than you would imagine that they're actually out there. A lot of you guys probably have, if not full on blown empathy, fractions of it, and that's great. But it's really your best learning tool and your best defense for interacting with this human experience that we have. It's great. But a really, really important thing also that we'll get into, and we've talked about this a few times on Alchemy 101, just because it's really, really important to be aware of your surroundings and the people that you're impacting. But when it comes to like real empaths, right, and not the fake versions, like there's fake versions of everything, but your stress is their stress, which makes an empath very excited to be around everyone for all the different experiences they can have, but also makes them withdraw a lot because so many of us, haven't gone through the process of learning the emotional stability and learned how to control and befriend the outward ego, which is also very, very doable and really, really important. And then lastly, again, with the energy fields, we're talking about the full spectrum of this, right? And we'll have to probably actually dedicate an entire episode just to energy fields to really do it justice. But because the outward ego has such a strong effect on empaths and empathy is just a version of detecting and being aware of more fields, it's important to include that in tonight's episode. So again, any questions at any point, and some of you guys are still messaging me from Facebook, so that's cool. So if you guys see me looking back and forth, I'm just trying to cover everybody. So again, thanks guys. All right. So the outward ego as an operating system, right? And again, as I mentioned before, I do have like PowerPoints and kind of presentations just so I can keep on the flow of certain topics. So anyone that is interested in getting this, either message me on YouTube, or you can go to mistech.net, contact me there, and I could be more than happy to send you out a copy if you want to look into more research and more versions of how I've kind of pieced this together. So I always like to make that available. So the human body is a biometric supercomputer. Okay. Hold on, where's this thing? I really wanted to get into this with you guys. I hope I didn't accidentally delete it. That would suck. Oh, there it is. Okay, cool. Sorry. So anyways, so the human body, as I mentioned, is a biometric quantum supercomputer, right? You guys have to understand this. This is all electrical inputs and endings, and the experts that look at neurology, and this is really interesting, they estimate that the mind thinks between 60 to 80,000 thoughts a day. Now, there's a lot of conflicting information about this out there, because some people consider it the length of time of a thought, whether it's a millisecond, what's conscious, what's unconscious. But no matter how much research I came across on the site, that was the range that seemed to be the closest definitive answer. So I would say those numbers are probably close to a minimum, but again, that's operating at supercomputer speeds, right? Though not concrete, but we overuse our brain, right? So if your body is this biometric computer, right? Think about this, guys. Again, Alchemy, we like to use the double meaning of things, really, really important. So that means you're going to need hard drive space, right? So people like Einstein, Benjamin Franklin, if you do research on how they processed and how they organized parts of their mind, is they came to the conclusion and acknowledgement that the mind's capacity to remember and process is not infinite, right? At some point it might have been, and maybe we can get there again, but in our current state and in current environment, there's only so much information that we can have. So they purposely chose to forget the regular details of the day to better remember the secrets of the universe. So it's not necessarily about not having an interest, and it's not even about what's important or not important, because that comes down to a personable, egotistical scale of value. So at the end of the day, if you're a light worker or a shadow worker and you're on the side of life and all those things, then life begets more life. So that means any version of you being able to create more nourishment, whether it's through yourself or through outward actions that you do, everyone on that side of the fence is on your team. Everyone that's trying to take the nourishment and try to eat the nourishment and try to steal the nourishment, those are people that are playing for the other side. So this is part of what the alchemist understands as, it's not necessarily what's important versus what's not. It's about what type of impact does this action and thought process take, right? So your hard drive space, because there's so many things that you can do and experience in this world. Delaney, welcome. Thank you. So glad you made it. That you want to make sure that the space is going into the place that can create the most amount of impact, right? So flushing things out and creating routines so you have specific things that trigger a certain response or a certain impact to make sure you're doing the work that you need to do is so important. So keep in mind, you have hard drive space. You have to have a processing system. Now, the processing system is very interesting because this is currently measured essentially by what your IQ is, but even to a degree of just how that information is presented, how you're supposed to present the information, there's still a sliding scale to what we see and what we understand, is all I'm saying. But your processing system is the amount of speed that your thoughts run at, right? So what's really interesting is a lot of times people with ADHD, attention dialed to a higher dimension, it's working faster. That's that higher dimension. So it's not that they're scatterbrained, it's that their brain is working at very, very high speeds. And the most part of our society norm is set to be at a much slower pace. So because not everyone can operate there, you're having to slow it back down. So for the adults out there, think about what it's like trying to talk to maybe a 1 or 2 year old or 3-year-old. And that's what the ADHD people have to do to the people that are non-ADHD. And it's not that either one is better. It's just different perspectives of how we're taught and ways that we're trying to communicate, right? But so your process system is very, very important. Obviously, you'll have an antivirus system, right? Which is going to be your immune system, right? You have your temperature regulation. You've got your operating systems. You've got your programs. You've got your systems within systems. And because you're a human being, you have living systems. And the ego is just one of the programs that's in the operating system, right? Now, the outward ego that we're talking about tonight, that's one of many of the operating systems within the ego, right? And the outward ego is the one that's mostly for like defense, right? And for validation. Spirit is more here for acknowledgement, which are knowledgeable agreements, and like acknowledge is acting in knowledge. So again, you have a thing that's coming from a space of agreements and information and data versus something that's coming from a defensive and validating perspective. Now, talking about this stuff and really trying to figure out how to present this to you guys tonight. Again, I want to make sure I had definitions and make sure we're approaching these things with the right open mind. And Ariel, you're here too. Thank you so much. Jay Cole in the building, my wizard man. So good seeing you. Influence is more easily helpful. Impact can harmfully destroy. Influence is more likely to be enjoyed. Absolutely, man. I love it. Thank you. Thank you for that. Good seeing you, brothers. Good seeing you. And Ariel, love you, miss you. So validation versus acknowledgement. Okay, this is really important, guys. And this is really interesting. Just listen to how these are written out in the definitions. And it's so funny because, again, as I'm putting together this PowerPoint for you guys, I accidentally pasted the validation definition under acknowledgement, and I'm reading it and I can feel myself getting emotional. Like, no, that can't be right. And I'm looking at it going, oh, okay, that makes way more sense. So validation versus acknowledgement. So validation, by definition, check this out, guys. This is interesting. Recognition or affirmation that a person or their feelings or opinions are valid or worthwhile. That's interesting to me. I'm gonna read that again. Validation, definition, recognition or affirmation that a person or their feelings or opinions are valid and worthwhile. That's really interesting to me. So I'm going to read the acknowledgement one to you because they mean essentially the same thing. But when you get into the definition of it, I want you to hear the definition of this other one and tell me if you can tell the difference. And don't worry, we're going to go over both of them, but this is really interesting. Mary, how you doing tonight? So acknowledgement, definition, the action of expressing or displaying gratitude or appreciation for something. That just resonates better to me. I'm going to say that one again too. So the action of expressing or displaying gratitude or appreciation for something. Now, I'm going to go over my little notes and everything to make sure we cover that because that stuff was important. I don't know what was channeling or what was downloaded at the time, but we got to make sure we cover that. But let me just say in those two definitions alone. So the validation part requires another person's action for fulfillment. So we're already off in the wrong spot because we don't already have self-fulfillment. Also, it makes their feelings or opinions valid or worthwhile. If you need that from another person, then you don't know yourself. So this again creates another misconception about what's going on. So people want to feel validated. That doesn't necessarily serve your highest good. That's not the same thing. But acknowledgement, that means that what you're doing can be acknowledged, it can be appreciated, and for something. So that's the other thing that's cool about validation. Validation requires a person, right? It requires the self, it requires the ego. But acknowledgement, it says action of expression or of expressing or displaying gratitude or appreciation for something. So you can acknowledge anything that's out there, but you can only validate a person. So that's what I mean by, like, with nature, nature's never trying to impress anything. It's just being itself, and everything gets done. So much that the cycle's been able to repeat itself for millions of years. So that's what we're looking for here, right? So real quick, let's see. Chanel, thank you for showing up tonight. Caitlin, one based in gratitude, the other's based in needing two totally different energies. Yes, it is. It's so crazy. Thank you, Caitlin. Thank you for that. So validation. So when you think about validation, right? And guys, again, this is just the rantings of an old alchemist. Don't worry about me. But validation is basically the energy that the outward ego feeds on. So it tries to create it as much as it can, right? This is part of the ego that knows the human experience is going to end at some point. So it operates with fear, and it feeds on things from the outside because it doesn't understand that there's not a real end. It doesn't understand that it's going to transmute in some new type of energy, right? So this is the part of your being that feels starved for attention. This is also where you hear the term energy vampires. That's what it is, right? And it's funny because growing up, I remember living in Iowa, it was, you know, old school stuff, but they'd always talk about, oh, you're sucking my will to live. And it really feels like that for the empath, right? But the energy vampires, they don't know any better. That's food. So energy vampires. So the true master, right? And guys, mastery is an ongoing process. So just because you've mastered it, that's like beating one of the grades or beating a level somewhere. Ravenswood, how you doing tonight? Cordia, welcome. Wendy, good seeing you guys. So the true master, they learn how to like merge and reprogram not only the outward ego, but their entire self, their entire operating system to be able to accept each other in their forms to create balance to this human experience, right? So a lot of people talk about like killing the ego. And maybe the overall of the outward ego, the bad part of it, sure, starve that. You know, get that out of here. But the overall ego, and it's funny that Jason the Wiz is in here tonight. What he was explaining this to me was, and I love it, it's more like a travel guide for your human experience. It knows what, like, hey, you might like this. Hey, you probably be really good at this. And it's kind of just like your tour guide while you're on this path, while you're on this plane. Now, it's been corrupted and toxified like so many other things that we experience while we're here. But that's why I want to really specify the difference and talk about the outward ego, the one that needs the validation, right? The one that needs that fuel, that energy. Now, acknowledgement, on the other hand, right? This operates from your higher self and from enjoyment and appreciation. It is nourishment. So it's the acknowledgement that we're able to appreciate this experience. And that part, because it's coming from spirit, knows it's infinite. So it doesn't need anything to fill the void at all. Beginners, and then guys, this is a really cool thing too, right? And anyone that's gone through this process in the channel, please let me know. And I'd love to hear your feedback on this. But beginners will usually like only acknowledge what serves their highest good, right? And they know because like their energy and their thoughts will just, their food and will feed into whatever it is that they think about. And so they don't want to feed in anything that doesn't serve their highest good, right? That's usually how we start off. And a lot of us are still in that place and get back into that space. Man, good room tonight. Thank you guys. But a true master, what they'll learn is that this is true, but if you don't operate from that outward ego, you're able to acknowledge and appreciate everything, and kind of both consider the good and the bad, both, because they're creating contrast for the experience. So you're able to enjoy both of them. Does that make sense? So this just allows for more abundant types of nourishment that the master can offer. Because if you talk to any farmer, you talk to anyone that grows, they'll tell you there's different seasons, there's different environments. And so if you're a master that can only produce one specific type of nourishment, and something should come into your environment, into your energetic space to where you can't, if you've taken the time to navigate the different types of emotions and emotional spectrums that we have, you can learn to create more types of nourishment to be able to offer. So it's really, really important that we get away from this validation portion of it, because that's requiring other people to tell us about how great we are and about what we deserve to have and how divine that we are. So it doesn't mean to come from a place of me, but it comes from a place of understanding that you're a divine, all-powerful being, and being able to implement that into your day-to-day through things like gratitude and acknowledgement. Humbleness is really, really key, and it's difficult to see for some people. It really is. And so for kind of transitioning from the outward ego into the empath, one of the things I want to kind of talk about with you guys was the emotional system, or the emotional spectrum, right? The full range of emotions that you experience, which again, guys, when we talk about what we can see for this reality, right? This is cool. We have a visible spectrum, right? And those go from what we can visibly see to how we relate to temperature, to how we relate to our chakra points. You know, the spectrum is a huge thing. So why not also apply that to the spectrum of emotion? It's the same thing, right? Just different areas of it. If you lovingly offer validation, then it can help another. Yeah, 100%. And Wendy, I agree with that. If you're offering like loving validation, it's not that it can't help. It's more of the words and routines that we implement and how those words are perceived, the more impacting they're going to be. So it's like, do I want to give you some water out of the faucet, or do I want to give you some Kangen water? Like, you could do both, but one's just more effective. So why even bother with the other one? Just because a lot of times with the validation, even if your approach is out of the loving and out of growth, because the energy vampires are out there, people will take that validation as a new food source. So if you're just doing the acknowledgement part, it's easy to keep them at energy length to where they need to be in their space and you can be in yours without enabling that portion, but still acknowledging and encouraging healthy growth. So that's all I mean by that. Really important just to transmute it. Cordia, so great to see you too. Thank you. So the emotional and system and spectrum, right? So it's kind of one of the apparatuses that the outward ego operates in. It's the main apparatus. There's all these different things, like this is how I grab stuff, this is how I eat, this is how I smell. Well, the program of the outward ego needs something for its program to run through, and that happens to be your emotional system and your emotional spectrum. So a lot of other systems that are within your body have access to the emotional system, but that's kind of like the playground for the outward ego, right? So your emotions have the ability, and this is what's cool, man. It's a double-edged sword, because if you don't know how to control your emotions, they have the very easy ability to override your ability to critical think. And so if you can pair your critical thinking with your emotions, that's where you'll get to true knowledge of self. But one cannot be there to override the other. And emotions, especially paired with outward ego, have the ability to very quickly override and overshadow every other part of how you would actually, process and experience anything. So looking at the emotional system, and guys, this is just my opinions and stuff, and I'm talking as a whole, right? Everything always has its gray area, but the emotional system is mostly for processing, right? I know you are, Wendy. I love you. Thank you. It's mostly for processing, right? And so if you look at a computer or you look at a system, processing is something that's done internal. That's the best space for processing to happen. It's the spectrum that the emotion uses. So that is an internal thing. The logical system is based off of math. It's based off of cause and effect. So because it requires cause to have an effect, that's a system that's more made for action. This is just how the two different things work. Now, they can work together in conduit, absolutely. But the thing is, if you take emotion out of the equation and use logic, you'll almost always come out with a life-giving result and into a positive. But if you take out logic and use emotion only, it's not the same thing. So in that, by going to the extremes, we can see at least we're operating and putting action, which one is the winner by far. But you have to learn to use both sides of it. And if you can't, then it's very, very, very important that you know not to operate from that space. And that's just where a lot of people come into confusion and not being able to communicate because of, again, not being able to see the color green. So how if I'm trying to express to you the color green and you can't see it, how are you going to understand what I'm saying? Right? So the outward ego, it can just override your emotional system to where that you're unaware that you're unaware. Like you don't even know. And this mostly comes from misplaced values. And those just kind of force you to experience a whole array of the emotional system. So the more misplaced values that you have, and with how our non-conducive environment is for the most part, unless you've got some really good people like you guys in the channel, thank you guys for being here. It's really difficult to not have this over systematic version of a plethora of emotions throughout the day, just with what's in front of us, what we talk about, what's focused, what you overhear, all those things. And the wider that emotional spectrum just kind of strains you or stretches you out, the less stability that you have, no pun intended. Now, if you don't have knowledge of self, then it's really hard for you to act in knowledge, because if that's true, then the closest, okay. So sorry guys, notes and everything. We trying this in a way tonight. So basically, if you don't have knowledge of self, then you cannot act in knowledge, right? And you need to acknowledge things in order to understand them and to really have the experience the right way. So if you don't have any knowledge of self, which is the truest thing that you should possibly know, it's the closest thing to you, it's yourself. So if you don't know that, how could you possibly know anything else or understand something else, right? So people that have that initial thing of, man, I don't know me, and a lot of times it comes from trying to please other people, right? So it's really difficult to understand and be in that space because the knowledge of self is not there. So if that's not there, then everything else seems really scattered and really chaotic because I'm not even sure what I am or who I am or how this is supposed to work, right? So again, this is how the outward ego breaks down your system and really gets implemented deep in there. Like any other virus, any of the hackers that are out there know, like once you get something uploaded, you get it uploaded as many places as you can, as quickly as can. So I hear. Right, but that's how it works. And so this is the same thing. You have to look at these things as operating systems and data. Just that's how it works. So the self-attack that the outward ego like transmits or makes you go through, that triggers a fight or flight response in you, right? So even if, you know, I don't know myself, what could I possibly know? So for that, I need validation. I need outside energy to feed on. I need someone else to tell me what I know is right. So that way the operating system doesn't get destroyed, right? And really, those are the people that need the empaths the most, right? Because again, you're trying to navigate and operate within this field, within this spectrum that you don't fully understand. And I'm not saying that the empath always fully understands as well, but they're more equipped with some of the tools, right? So for definition of empath, I you know, obviously I Googled it, but I also came up with my own, and I think it's a little bit more accurate from my experience so far. Before we get into that, let me double check a couple things in the channel. How's everyone doing? I think part of that worth differentiation is validating versus gratitude. And, Lindsay, I agree with that 100%. So validation versus gratitude. Yeah, and that's another big thing. And I think that gratitude is attached to that acknowledgement part. And so I think it's really important because acknowledgement is everything. There's people like when they do job tests about what's more important, pay obviously is always towards the top, but surprisingly, acknowledgement and awards is actually much higher up on the list at almost every single genre of business out there. And it's really, really interesting. So the acknowledgement is something that we do need, and it implies and impacts our overall shared reality. So the acknowledgement is super, super important, and doing it from a gracious place is always so much more vibrational and impacted that way. So thank you for that, Lindsay. Really, really important. So the empath, by definition, check this out. A person with paranormal ability to apprehend the mental or emotional state of another individual. And then it had in parentheses, chiefly in science fiction. That's the Oxford version of the definition of empath. Now, the Alchemist version, the Biometric Living System for detecting energy fields. Full spectrum available with programming, includes emotional spectrum at startup, does not come with user manual. Halo Marques. That's what the empath is. Right off the bat, you have the ability to detect these other energy fields. For the most part, it's emotional energy fields. And what's really funny about that is most empaths, and I'm sure a lot of people that are in the channel tonight will be able to definitely agree with this. They've gone through an array of traumatic events for the most part. But along that, they've learned how to navigate that emotional spectrum I was talking about for themselves. So they've become very, very good at becoming emotional stable for everything that comes through their day-to-day. However, once that happens and your empathy kicks in, and that field can grow to world size, really. But all of a sudden you can be upset or be down, you know, and have no idea why. And go, man, I don't know what this is. Something is on me today. And what that is, guys, is that's your empathy picking up on your neighbor, on your spouse, on your kid, on your grandparents, on the guy 3 doors down. Like, you never know what these things that you're picking up are. It's crazy because there's like old school radios that as you just go through, you'll start picking up frequencies and you don't always know where they're coming from, but that's an apparatus device that we created to be able to detect those signals that we don't even know where they're coming from, but we do know the signal's there and at what frequency it resonates at. You see what I'm saying? Both definitions made me, yeah, thank you, Caitlin. I thought both the definitions, yeah, they're great. So when we're talking about the empath and we're talking about the human being, right? We've got our devices for detection for all the different types of energy fields that are out there, right? So we've got 5 at least. Some say 6, some say a dozen. Who knows how many senses that we have? But these are the biometric human apparatuses that we have to process the human experience while we're here, right? UV light. Right, we talked about this a lot because of Mistech. In the 1800s, it was discovered, and then we created devices to be able to detect it, to be able to read it, to become more aware of it. And that's one of multiple things that we've done since we've been here. But we can create any type of device, any type of apparatus to detect what we become aware of. Right. So before we didn't know UV light was there, we didn't know how to detect it. Before we found out about the Merkaba field that we have, right? We didn't know how to try to start detecting that or looking for it. So the empath and many, many people, guys, are born with these innate abilities that they are the devices, they are the apparatuses. And as you progress through your spiritual growth, and even if you get into self-development and you don't take the spiritual route, it's going to lead you there anyways, I promise. You'll start developing these things. And as you stay in humility and stay in dedication and stick to the process of the alchemy of up and down, these things will become more and more available to you all the time. Matt Finger, how you doing? So empaths and most of us are born with this ability kind of built in. We're just not taught how to use it. We're actually trained specifically to build like antivirus walls around all that part of our being. And then it's kind of reinforced again through how society is set up. And with mass consciousness and all these other things there, it's really crippled the energy body for a lot of people. But as we pass through these cosmic ley lines and people are going to more places of power to activate the energy field and breathing correctly and all these beautiful things that are happening right now, our devices for detection are at an all-time high. And I'm sure some of you people out there right now are the people that are creating these new versions to see the world. And thank you for what you're doing. It's really, really important. What's interesting about this, like this antivirus that they've put together, it's really, really powerful. And because there's so much like lack of knowledge of self that people will argue and ignore what the empath says, right? This is crazy. And I've done it. We've all done it where someone's like, hey, what's wrong? Nothing. We flat out lie, like no big deal. But there's a reason that that's being asked. And sometimes, guys, it's not even the empathy part. Sometimes it's just the way you carry yourself. Sometimes it's body language. But to the true empath, they really, really, really feel it. It's crazy. Like when my empathy kicked in, I was working at Everest College, right? True story. Once upon a time, it was beautiful. And my office had about, I think like 300 people in it. Anyone that's live, correct me if need be, but I think about 300 people. And there'd be times my desk was in the back that I'd be walking to my desk, great mood as usual, walking on sunshine, doing the dance, and hit some weird, what is that? And get to my desk and sit and just do like a quick scan of look at somebody. And sometimes I knew, sometimes not. And dial the extension, be like, hey, is everything okay? And they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, I don't know. I was feeling real good. And I felt this. It was weird. And, hopefully everything's okay, but what's going on? And every single time it'd be some like terrible morning someone had, and, a little 5-minute coach and some breathing and smiling and waving from the far side of the room, get the energy back up. It's important. It's the exchange. But you cannot ignore what the empath says, right? So if you've not gone through like self-development, and I mean deeply, right? And you say things like, I don't know why I feel this way, then chances are you probably don't know how to process what it is that you're feeling, which is not a bad thing. That just means that you have to acknowledge it and come to it, right? Come to the understanding. It's okay. There's everything that we don't know. And most of the things we know, we change as time goes on, as we understand new perspectives and so on. So acknowledgement is the first part, right? So the outward ego will make you like lash out at the empath, right? Because they know that the empath can teach you how to remove the fangs. It's crazy. Yes, Jason. Nassim Harmy, man, United Field work. I met him too. It was cool. And he recognized your picture, so he liked you too. Always a good sign. What was this example? Yes. Example for this, guys. Now watch this. And please, I would love your guys' feedback on this because I was working on this a bit today. I thought this was hilarious. So I travel a lot, like a lot. I fly a lot for Mistech. So thank you again for everyone that supports that. And I'm going to be in Vancouver the 25th through the 28th at the Whole Life Expo. I'm going to be in Laughlin, Nevada for the Starworks UFO Expo, November 1st to the 3rd. And then I'll be in Toronto, I believe it's the 7th through the 10th for another expo. So thank you guys for all the support. And if you haven't checked it out, go to mystech.net, mystech.net, and check out our biotech company. It's amazing, amazing stuff, frequency, all that. But because of that business, I get to travel a lot. Now, you guys ever go through like a metal detector at the airport and you're 100,000% sure you took all the metal out of your pockets and nothing's there and you're good, right? And then you walk through and it goes boop, 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 and it goes off and sets the alarms. And you go, no, I don't have anything on me. I checked. And, TSA is like, nope, go back through. And you go through and the detective goes, bullshit, he's got something. Definitely, he's got something. Bullshit. And you're like, no, I'm sure. And you check your pockets, your back pocket. You check all the obvious places. You make sure your belt's not there, right? And then on the back, you find that little metal pin that your kid brother stuck on the back of you while you were flirting with the ticket girl, right? And you set the alarm off with something that you didn't even know was there, but you still set the detector off because the detector lets you know. So that's exactly what it's like talking to an empath and saying, no, nothing's wrong, right? The difference is that if you don't listen to the detector, like at the airport, you just don't get to get on the flight. You miss the plane, you miss the flight, right? Ignoring an empath, there's parts of your life that you could miss out on. Like, so you have to understand, like when these radars and these beeps and these scans go off, you have to understand how real that is. And that's not always like, a lot of times it's because people, hey, Rob, thank you, man. Thank you. Much love to you too. A lot of times it's because, again, that outward ego doesn't want to die. It doesn't want to get the fangs pulled out. So like any like caged animal, it goes crazy and lashes out and goes all wild and everything because it doesn't want to have this thing pulled away. It doesn't want to lose its life force, right? It doesn't want to transmute. But when you walk through this detector and it goes beep, 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 and you're 100% positive, you're 1,000,000 times positive, remember the detector is going off for a reason. So if you don't understand it, at least take the time to find out what it is. Sometimes the universe will just use any person there to help you figure out what it is. And if you have some resentment, if you have some doubt, any of the things from the person that's there from the universe to advise you, you might dismiss that information. You might, right? So just keep in mind the things that you're doing as your self-development processes. Like there's so many things that will come along your path and in front of you from unexpected places. And that's the places that you can choose to grow or choose to flounder and lay there and let you, the fangs sink in deeper if you want. I mean, that's kind of how it works. And thank you for that, Chanel. Thank you. Hold on, there was something else I was gonna say earlier. So yeah, okay, we'll bring that back. So with the airport scanner to the empath thing, I hope that makes sense with you guys. When we're talking about the validation versus acknowledgement, and I was saying like seeing green versus emerald, right? One of the things I talk about a lot with different people that I coach through metaphysics and things along the awakening process, I'll say just certain words or certain terminology that you use when you're talking tells me what position along the journey that you are, right? So, and this is what I mean, when you go through the awakening and your spectrum is fully activated, right? You don't see, oh, that's green. No, that's emerald. That's something majestic. It's something beyond whimsical and perfect and lovely and beautiful and all the great words. But if it's just green, well, there's a good chance the person is just unaware of all those other things, right? Not necessarily that it's just lazy talk. It really is, that's what's in front of them. And so that's the other thing is it's not something to be upset or frustrated about when you're working with these people and you're helping them and they're helping you, because there's going to be a difference in communication, right? But as long as you're both after the same goal, which should be better self-awareness and growth for all, then there shouldn't be a version of rubbing each other the wrong way. There shouldn't be a version of tension or anything like that. And in all things that we do, there's always a master and there's always an apprentice. And you have to acknowledge that and implement that in everything that you do as well. I play classical music for television. Oh, Desiree, that's beautiful. That's perfect. Crystal, it's okay, man. We'll have it up on the site so you'll be able to see it from the beginning. And thank you, man. Really good seeing you too. Really good seeing you guys all tonight. Okay, so this I wrote out a lot, and we've got. Let me see. Hope you guys having a good time. We got about 20 minutes, so I think we should be good on time. But I want to make sure I cover this stuff with you guys. So empaths, right? This is the reality of the empath, right? It's really important. So this, if anything, you haven't taken notes yet, this is a good time. And I'm gonna read a lot, so don't mind me. I'll pay attention to the movement in the chat. Love you guys. All right. So the reality of empath. Empaths innately or through training learn to navigate the emotional spectrum in many spectrums. It usually starts with understanding the elemental spectrum. Yeah, ego, love it, kill it, or cage it. You know what, Eminante, that's a good question. Love it, kill it, or cage it. So I believe the ego, kind of what we were talking about at the beginning of the show, is part of a larger program. And within that program, there's a multitude of types of the ego. So we're mostly talking about the outward ego. And so the outward ego is the kind that caging it until you can train it and get it to do tricks for you. You don't want to kill it. You still want to love it. And you only need to cage it so it stops putting you in the cage. But it's something that you need to be able to work in harmony with and understand that once you understand you're an infinite being, there's no reason to fill a void. There's no reason. Yeah, exactly. Don't let it, control it. Don't let it control you. Perfectly. Yeah, we'll say. Sorry, sometimes I ramble, guys. It's okay. It's a wizard thing. So most importantly, empaths, for all the people out there that don't believe that that's a thing, I cannot stress this. It's very, very real, right? And if you don't want to believe it, it doesn't make it any less real. That has, your belief has nothing to do with fact. And the funny thing about that is there's more and more science all the time that's proving this. There's more and more science that are proving our energy fields, showing how our consciousness and our awareness actually changes and alters our reality. So these things are real. So you don't have to like it. It doesn't change it. It's still the same thing. Mass consciousness is the main cause of empathy, believe it or not. And empathy is just a byproduct of our overall connectedness. So it's really, really important that you understand that your empathy also is just a byproduct of something much bigger and much larger. And this is one of the reasons that it's so important that you understand what it is, you appreciate it, you respect it, and you really learn to sharpen yours and help those around you learn to harness theirs as well. This mass consciousness thing, guys, is no joke. Imagine if like every single person in the chat room right now, if all of you guys were masters of empathy, and maybe you are, but if you are, your conglomerated conscious thought literally raises that ability and process for every other person on the planet. So this is why what we do and why our routines and the pauses and the breaks, all these things are very, very important as we affect the whole. Right now, just because I said that and it's a little off topic, but equally important, the break and the breath is also super, super, super beyond important. I don't mean doing it out of laziness or, entropy, anything like that, but taking the break, taking the pause is equally important as the note, as the beat. You have to have these things. So make sure that while you're on your journey, that you are taking time to hibernate. And sometimes if you're in a lower space, it's really, really, guys, I'm telling you, very important to choose to stay in that space and process that emotion and get used to it and learn the experience of the emotion. And then like anything else, it doesn't take the toll, and it's something that you can learn to appreciate, right? And that's what acknowledgement is. So it's really important that we do these things. A lot of people that get misdiagnosed with like mental health issues are actually empaths, and they're detecting emotions and energy fields that are not their own. And that's why at times people, like I said, they don't know why they feel this way. It's weird, but it's just one of these things. Like, I know I feel this, but I don't know what it is, because it's not you. It's your biometric radio antenna of life that you're detecting, and something is out of whack, and that's what's rubbing your spidey senses. It's really weird. Yeah, Matt Finger, you're right. When you can see yourself at a distance, oh man, it's incredible. Let's see. So I just want to make sure I cover all these things. This is important. The voices said so, wink. Oh yeah. So some people, myself included, and my wife was the first person to point this out to me. I didn't realize this was something that I'd be experiencing in this time. But Freedom, good seeing you tonight. Thank you for being here. there's some people that their empathy is at such a high level that it's shot off into its own little branch of something called geometric stress. And that affects the physical body when there's things like earthquakes and huge storms. It's just detecting a flux in energy fields of the world's people. So I've been hospitalized like 3 times where all my vitamins and minerals, by the time I got into the doctor, had like bottomed out, and they don't know why. And I eat fairly healthy, all sorts of stuff. There was no reason for it, but all of a sudden everything was wiped. Well, the second time it happened, my wife told me that some earthquake had just happened like 10 minutes before that hit me. And then we looked up the time it happened before that, and there was another earthquake somewhere else. And so this geometric stress is some level of empathy allows you to tune into a full spectrum of energy fields, guys. That's what I'm talking about. But most of us start off with the emotional piece, and that's it. Thank you. Thank you for the backdrop, man. The green screen, it helps, makes things fun. Eastern mythicism holds that the ego is our 5D higher self tour guide in the 3D, like a bloodhound. Yeah, that's what I was saying, Jason. Yep. Western confusion teaches a delusion that the ego is a survival mechanism, which makes our ego insane. Yep. And that's what I mean. So, and that's why I said I prefer to break it down into different portions, because I don't think any one thing is ever all just the one thing, right? Everything has versions of it, just depending on your perspective. And that's the reality of the situation. So, but yeah, absolutely. The ego is an amazing tool if you learn how to use it the right way. But the version that we've been taught that that's what the ego is, that version definitely can be a little misconstrued. Desert Rose, the solar flares that you're talking about that's been making you dizzy. And guys, check this out. This is from download. So this is free info from the ether. This is beautiful. So as we're flying through the cosmos in this huge, gigantic cosmos that we're in, right? As this is happening, I think this is very exciting. We're crossing through all these, galactic ley lines, these huge magnetic fields. And when we cross through those, guys, check this out. The sun, that's this big hurling ball of gas and energy and everything, it's flying through. Now, because of its density, its mass, the gravitational pull, electromagnetic field, so on, for the most part, that flare, that ball of energy stays spherical. But when it passes through a ley line, all that energy creates a pull on it and creates a ripple. And that's why it's always solar flaring coming back towards us. So know that a lot of times when there's a solar flare, it's not just a solar flare that's making your spidey senses tingle and your energy go crazy. It's the fact that we're passing through a galactic cosmic ley line. And that shift is also going to be causing a lot of distortion and weirdness. So just extra little stuff. But yeah, the solar flares, that's what that's coming from. Sorry, guys. We got a few minutes left. We'll make sure we stay on at least for artists first. And I don't know, maybe we'll keep going with another show afterwards if you guys want. We'll see. But thank you, guys. This is fun. So, okay. So, yeah. So empaths feel like the geometric stress. This is why there's such a strive for peace and tranquility from empaths, guys. If any of you have empathetic friends, a lot of them will tell you that they like to be alone or they like to go out in nature. The reason they want this peace and tranquility is because now that they found it in themselves and have the ability to experience the emotion without operating from it, they're very, very good at having those stable emotions. So when they experience your unstable emotions, it creates an imbalance in their being, and they don't know how to control that or how to navigate it because it's not theirs. So that's why they'll always want to try to have you also get on this path and get on this page and get to that level of understanding, because your stress is their stress. Your emotion is their emotion, whether anyone likes it or not. That's just the reality of the situation. Like getting back to that, like airport thing. Imagine if like you're at the airport, what do you think a TSA person would do if like every time someone walked through, there was some annoying little kid with a piece of metal that just set it off on purpose every single time? Like that's what they're doing every single time. And going, what are you doing? Well, I don't know. I'm just doing it. So, they would like detain the kid, or they would keep him there just depending on how quickly they want the line to go. But that's what it's like being an empath and being around an emotionally unstable person. It's like, oh my, why? And then a lot of times it's because of reasons I don't know. So unfortunately, like all things, like people take advantage of that. So sometimes people will claim to be an empath, even though they're not. And try to manipulate and all these other things. But there's like early warning signs for that. I don't want to make sure we miss. And really, you could just look at the person's regular day to day. If they're after things for themselves, and I mean really for themselves, that's probably not a thing. If they're working to do better, they're trying to impact the world in a positive way, they want positive change, they want love, then that's good. But if you don't see them like striving and working and all these things, that's like a psychopath. Run. That's crazy. Get away from that. And when it comes to those type of situations, if you can't tell the difference of the person on your own, I apologize, but in my opinion, then you should be in that person's life and they shouldn't be in yours, vice versa. Like the empath will be happy with anything that removes limbo and negative energy from them. So just be honest. But again, this is what you mother lovers need. You need the empath. You need these people to help you with the navigation. So the highly emotional destabilized in your field creates space, and the outer ego can take that space and embed itself. That's how that works. If you can't navigate the negative spectrum and you can't navigate the emotional spectrum, then you find someone that can, like an empath. Let's see. Boom, 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 boom. I think we got everything, guys. But I just got a few minutes left for the hour. So I'm trying to make sure we cover all the. Oh, you know what? We still got 10 minutes, guys. We're good. Man, artist first, thank you. Love you guys. You guys still good for another 10 minutes in the show? Restaurant, you can hear the oh yeah, Desert Rose. When you go to the restaurant and you can hear it, oh, it's terrible. Terrible, terrible. All right, so let's back this up. So highly emotional destabilization, right? This comes directly from a sign of lack of knowledge of self, right? And because of that, that's where the outward ego will come in, right? Because it will help give you direction to feel like that's what yourself wants, right? Does that make sense? Okay. So if you don't know how to like build something, right, you find an engineer that does and have them teach you. So if you don't know how to navigate the spectrum, you find someone that can. Even if they haven't mastered it, but they're working on it, they're further along than you are. And when they help you learn, they'll be learning at the same time. So again, you guys are sharpening each other. Because your stress is going to be the empath stress, and this goes to a global scale. The faster that you befriend and apprentice under an empath, the quicker all of us are going to feel like less angst across the board. So this is why it's really important to make friends with your local empath. All right. Sharpen your empathetic abilities. And guys, you can do this with animals. It's crazy. If you look up spirit science on YouTube, they talk about ways of connecting with animals and all sorts of stuff. And all real stuff, man. You can connect with all life. This is all here for us, and we're here for it. So it's important that we respect it in turn. You know what I mean? So again, as far as what to do with the ego, in my opinion, transmuting it into something that merges well with like slay the evil ego, but sharpen the inner ego, like turn it into the inner version, right? So slay the evil ego and then ride the dragon. Like that's how this works. Like that's it. That's the evil version. Shamans, Reiki masters, light and shadow workers. These guys just know how to go in. They know how to reprogram. They know how to remove. They know how to install old and new operating systems, like anti-resident software that a lot of us have. So it's interesting with Mystech. I get a lot of people that as soon as they touch the band, they feel the frequency and start freaking out. On the other hand, you still have a handful of people that are like, I don't feel anything. This is just like an anti-resonance software program that's been embedded into the body, right? Just like so many other things that we have, it is something that can be reprogrammed. When this becomes reprogrammed, your ability to not just sense and see energy fields, but your ability to manipulate them become very, very real, right? So with the energy fields, this is cool. You've got your visible fields, you've got your non-visible fields, and then you've got your non-human detectable fields at all. Oh, Stephen, thank you, man. Master Band, shout out. Thank you. So when I'm talking about visible fields, we're talking about the color spectrum, and we're talking about reality. Guys, even this is still just fields of energy, particles and waves, depending on who's looking. But that's what's here, right? This is the visible version of energy fields. Your non-fields are going to be like your heat, your magnets, your electric, your radio, your UV, tons of other ones. Desert Rose, 963 hertz actually targets your crown. It's not that it's too high. It will just increase brain activity. I wear 2 of them just so I can have the brain working at that speed. So I'm a very big fan of it. But if you wear it for too long, some people do end up getting a headache. So just it's one of the ones to be careful with, but it's more for a chakra point in the body. But good question. And then as far as like non-human detectable things, and what I mean by detectable is like you can feel the heat, but you can't see it, right? You can feel the radiation, but you can't necessarily see it. Things that are fields that we can't detect, emotions, consciousness, biometric feedback, the chakras, the Merkabas, mana, so many things that are out there that we know are there, but it's okay that we acknowledge that we can't see those things. So when it comes to empathy and it comes to psychics and it comes to all the multi-spectrum of things that we have access to, it's not that it's not real. It's just that we don't always have the apparatuses and devices to be able to acknowledge it. So I hope that makes sense. And then I'm going to close with this, and I'm going to talk about a couple new things from Mistech. Again, thank you guys for being here tonight. It's been great. So in closing, this is what, was it Odin? This is what I had, and I have to read this exact, so bear with me here. So all is energy, value and perception change it. The emotional stimulants based off of alchemy, which uses equivalent exchange, sees no good or bad, only flux and energy. Does this energy provide nourishment on the other side of the flux? Or is this energy the flux itself constantly taking the energy and manipulating it to its own end? The double slit experiment proves that as we perceive reality, we can change it. If we hadn't changed it, it would still be the same energy in a different form. Water poured into a different shape is still the same water, but how we perceive the value of the shape instantly changes our value of the water. But it's the same water. Detachment allows the value system to slowly balance everything out as all is the same. Acknowledging everything for its beautiful design and the pattern of the great work we are here to do. Starve the ego, feed the soul. In order to feed, you need to be nourishment. If you feel like your life is a mess or you just don't know what you can grow, call your local empath. They're the gardeners of this human life. Oh, I like it. Good channeling. Thank you, whoever that was. But yeah, so guys, so that's really where we're at with all this stuff. And so when you're looking at the ego, and we're talking about the overbearing version of it, right? We're not getting nitpicky. Know that is something to be balanced out with the empath, and know that the empath is the human offering of being able to access more parts of these energetic fields. It's just what we're here for. So if it's not something that you've already tuned into for yourself, like really get to know an empath. And I'm telling you, these are the people that are like, man, I feel it in my gut. Like, oh, maybe this. Just know that that's a real thing. And the quicker that you're able to acknowledge it and appreciate it, the more that vibration will resonate with your reality and bring it more into something that's tangible and real for you. So that's what we got for tonight's show. A couple of things in closing. Still my boy Jay Douglas. He recently found out that he's got cancer and he's going through a bunch of stuff. And so we put up a GoFundMe. I'm going to put that in the YouTube channel. But if you go to GoFundMe, stress relief for healing Jay Douglas, JAE Douglas. We have a GoFundMe just to help him. And he's an amazing person. So I always want to make sure I cover that. And there's that link there. Do you have any bands that will help for the energy body? Okay, yes, I do. So Rob, okay, so yeah, so Mistech, so we have resonant frequency that can affect the cells in the body, mostly physical, but we also have ones that affect the energy body, like your chakra points and stuff as well. So the 963, we have them as our solfeggio frequencies that are on the website. And those will target different chakra points in the body. And if you know how those correspond and how they work, like I wear a couple 963 hertz frequencies. I wear some 852 to supercharge the pineal gland. Guys, tomorrow, I'm hoping tomorrow we'll get them. We're launching our pre-5G bracelets, and those have the frequency of the sun actually in them. I'm telling you, it's a whole different beast than anything that we've ever had. I love it. It's uplifting, it's directing, it's like having the sun. It's really interesting. But I can't overly stress, if you guys can't even share the GoFundMe, Jay Douglas is an amazing guy, and he's a tattoo artist. So really soon, and just to give you guys a sneak peek for being on the show with me tonight, we're also very excited to announce we're going to be releasing tattoo ink that's imprinted with Mistech in it. So anyone that's out there that doesn't like wearing jewelry or worry about it getting fallen off or breaking, anything like that, we're very soon going to be able to offer biometric hacking upgrades via tattoos permanently for your body. And you'll be able to get them in a ton of different frequencies and so on. So it's going to be insane. Like, I'm really, really excited to announce that with you guys. And whether you're in YouTube or you're on Artist First, these are going to be some of the most incredible products that have ever been on the planet. And I'm so excited. You guys can go to mistech.net, and on the contact us, you can message me if you want to pre-order them. A lot of times you do that, we give discounts and everything. I'm not sure all the details yet, but I will definitely take note if that does happen. Otherwise, you guys, thank you for coming on the show with me tonight. Really, really appreciate it. And I think we're going to start doing the show on YouTube every week along with Artist First. If you've not been on Artist First before and you're just seeing me on YouTube or on Facebook, usually every show that we've ever done has been archived on artistfirst.com. And you can find me on the left side under Halo Marques, your Jedi Alchemist Wizard. I love you guys. Please have a wonderful night. I'll see you guys soon. This is the Alchemist out. Love you.